Please welcome Sam Marks.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are here to talk about the building blocks of vibrant neighborhoods. I'm not going to read off the bios of all of our panelists. You can see their titles up there. But I'm going to ask each of them to give just briefly for a minute. Let the audience know from your background, from where you are institutionally in the city, what's the one thing that the audience should know about your biases, where you're coming from, that's going to help them understand how to frame your comments today? And we'll start with Maria, and we'll go down the line.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Torres-Springer. I'm the president of the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And so our work across the city is to drive and shape economic growth, but also create opportunity at the same time for New Yorkers. So in terms of the both experience and hopefully set of beliefs that I bring to the role, a lot of that is informed by, I think, a personal story that allows me to connect to the communities that we are trying to help, hopefully in a very authentic way. So I grew up, like many New Yorkers, like many Americans, a child of immigrants. My parents immigrated to the country in California a year before I was born. And we lived in subsidized housing for most of my life in California. I put myself through college and graduate school and have built a career since then to create opportunity for other people and for communities. And so what I think, and I moved to New York actually a week before 9/11, and so really felt in a very visceral way what it means to be part of a city that was at once so devastated, but really had such an amazing capacity to rebuild. So all of that, I think, has informed not just who I am as a person, but really the types of beliefs that I hope I am waking up in the morning thinking about as we do our work at the Economic Development Corporation. And that means, at least for me, hopefully an acute sense of the needs and really aspirations of the people we are trying to help at EDC. It means really understanding that we have not just the opportunity, but really the responsibility to unlock potential in people and in communities across the city. And lastly, it also means that, having seen how the city rebounded after 9/11 and knowing the history of our great city, a real understanding and belief in this city's capacity to move forward, to grow. And all of that has driven the agenda that I'm trying now to advance at EDC, which is one of inclusive growth, where we keep the fundamentals of our economy strong, where we keep evolving and we keep making sure that we are competitive on a global scale, but we do everything in our power to create opportunity for the people, the community, and the businesses of our city.
Eddie, 1 minute or less.
Sorry. 1 minute.
The thing that the audience should know about you, your biases that help frame your comments.
Sure. I'm Eddie Torres from the Department of Cultural Affairs. I mean, I would say essentially that when we look at social problems and when we look at challenges, it's very easy and makes a kind of linear sense to move into a problem orientation, to look at what's wrong and to focus on that. My concern about that as an approach is it's deficit-based, and I believe it's enervating. It drains us of energy, and it makes it that much harder for us to develop solutions, to develop creative solutions. As somebody who supports cultural affairs, I'm convinced that a creative approach is asset-based, and that most importantly, it's energizing, that it actually creates greater energy for solutions, sustainable solutions, and creative, unique solutions.
Hi, I'm Tupper Thomas. Parks is what I'm all about, and have been for many, many years, parks and open space, first in Prospect Park and with a national group called the City Parks Alliance, and now with the great New Yorkers for Parks, and advocating always for the open space. And I think the most important part about parks is how they are not only about physical health, but mental health, and they are all about community building. Frederick Law Olmsted once said, parks are a sense of enlarged freedom, and I think that still holds totally.
Phillip Morrow from Sobro. I would say that everything that they are talking about is what we do at Sobro and more. If to characterize how I would describe what I've been doing for the last 40 years is approaching the problems of poverty from a comprehensive point of view, and with the idea that we have no solution, the one solution, that there's a multiple aspects to how we address those problems, and our organization reflects that in many ways. We do housing and economic development and workforce development, youth services, and we do community organizing. We do a little bit of everything, a lot with young people, a lot with reentry, taking people from prison, a lot of, so we're trying to do everything that we can in a variety of ways. We work in the schools, we have after-school programs, we work at elementary, we have a charter school. All of those things we do because we say we don't really know what the answer is. We're just doing a lot of stuff, and we think that ultimately something will work, and it does work. You know, if you try it long enough, you keep at it hard enough, you're going to see successes, and that's what we look for.
Great. So as moderator, I'm going to take moderator's privilege to frame my own biases in a way that frames the conversation for the whole panel and what we're going to talk about. And that is that I was thrilled to see the panel names of the folks that I was going to be moderating today, because they're all some of my favorite people, and they're all implementers and people who are doing stuff and figuring out how to move from planning and concept to implementation. And that's, I think, where my bias has been professionally. And LISC New York City, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, is a national community development organization that has a long history of working across the country in cities, and I run the New York City program, to advance projects into implementation. Our core, our history has been around affordable housing development. And we've more recently expanded that mandate to look more holistically at neighborhoods. And I think the bias that I bring is that affordable housing development, real estate development, has a very robust and mature way that public and private sector and nonprofits work together, collaborate to advance projects, to deploy capital, and to get to implementation. I think we all agree in this room that the other aspects of neighborhoods, parks, open space, commercial revitalization, arts and culture, all of these things are important, but the question is how. How do we get those neighborhood amenities and assets implemented, and how do we do it quickly? And how do we do it in a way that brings public and private and nonprofit actors together in a way that's coordinated and makes sense? So what I'm going to ask the panelists to do is talk from their perspective about promising projects that they see that are getting implemented, that if you're at a public sector agency, involve private or nonprofit. If you're at a nonprofit, involve the public sector or private sector. And how are those pieces coming together, and what's promising about the projects that you're pushing forward? So again, we'll start with Maria, and we'll sort of work our way down.
Terrific. So we have a lot of what we do at EDC, aside from manage more than 60 million square feet of mostly industrial property across the city. We also do a lot to drive sector growth, but our bricks and mortar work include real estate development and neighborhood-wide planning. And in many instances, that means the work that we do in the context of major rezonings or major city-owned sites, and dispose of them for mixed-use development. Across the city, whether it is in Inwood, where we just started a neighborhood planning initiative just a couple of weeks ago, actually. So that's in its nascent stages, to the work that we're doing, for instance, in Jamaica, where a rezoning has happened, and now we're in the work of implementing a number of projects. Also Coney Island, where, as many of you know, the historic amusement district was revitalized, and now we're at the stage of building the housing and the infrastructure. And also in Sunset Park, where there's really an incredible density of a mix of uses, industrial, working waterfront, together with a burgeoning innovation economy. And in all of these neighborhoods, the work that we are doing when we are at our best, and so it's by no means perfect, and there's more certainly to do in the future. The key to that work, relevant to this panel, is the acknowledgement that the work that we have to do is not just something that is informed by all of the stakeholders from the very beginning, but is something that truly reflects not just the needs of any particular neighborhood, but the aspirations of community members, and that the implementation, therefore, of all of the projects, whether it's the building of a sewer line, the building of a park, the building of mixed-use development, that happens in a way that is truly reflective of all of that input that we have gotten, and then relies, of course, on the incredible multidisciplinary teams from the public and private side that really have to come together in order to not just build those buildings or those pipes or those parks, but really come together to build neighborhoods that provide positive outcomes for residents across the city. And so I'm very encouraged by the work that we've done over the course of the last few years. But more than that, I'm encouraged about our opportunity moving forward to drive economic growth in the city, but do it in a way where it meaningfully engages the people and the businesses and the communities that are, really the soul of each and every one of our neighborhoods.
It sounds like the cross-sector collaboration is woven into everything across all of that good work.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sure.
Eddie?
So we're actually, this is one of several partnerships with other city agencies that we're engaged in at Cultural Affairs. We're actually partnering with NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, which manages all of our public housing developments, specifically on the Make Mott Haven project. So for the past 2 years, using housing and urban, federal money, housing and urban development money, they've been actually engaging residents of the 5 developments in Mott Haven. Now Deborah Martin's going to come out in a little while, talk about some Mott Haven work. Specifically to develop a community vision for what they want Mott Haven to be. And these are the residents of Mott Haven. These are the residents of those housing developments in Mott Haven. And among the various elements that they articulated as their vision for their community is a robust arts and culture presence. And so they've been engaging a number of cultural organizations that are indigenous to the South Bronx. And we worked with them to leverage some more federal money from the National Endowment for the Arts and to supplement that with some NYCHA money and some cultural affairs money. And we're in the process of collectively fundraising from the private philanthropic market, specifically to get cultural organizations and support them in developing work in and around the NYCHA developments. As you know, just one of those things, the naming convention wound up creating very, very isolated pieces of the neighborhood. If you live in one development, oftentimes you're just about that one development. And we specifically want to create spaces that are actively programmed so that people are intermingling as neighbors, not as a resident of a solitary development. And we believe that arts and culture can do that by celebrating the contribution of South Bronx residents to the development of the arts, from jazz to Latin jazz to salsa to hip hop.
Yeah, and as you know, Eddie, LISC was the planning consultant for the Make Mott Haven plan.
I know.
And that thread of arts and culture came out of all of that community engaged process. It's fantastic to see that DCA is carrying that ball forward. So, Tupper.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the new affordable housing zoning, which it gives us a real opportunity to finally think about all the needs of those communities. And we have been working along with so many other people. We're just one part of in East Harlem. So I think the speaker who just spoke has created the atmosphere around the rezoning, the upzoning in East Harlem by really encouraging a lot of community involvement. New Yorkers for Parks has been able to provide technical assistance about parks and open space because we had done a very in-depth study of the open space in East Harlem. Already there is not enough. So how can we use this upzoning? How can we work with others to create some new open space as well. But I think that if you look at the upzoning as an opportunity, and if the community can really be involved and have lots of meetings, which is what the speaker's been able to do, and bring many of us who have different interests together so that we can really help that community in a way to take on these issues. So for me, that's like a way of looking positively at something that's a little fearful to people, but at the same time, I think something really great could come out of the process.
Yeah, interesting also that my framing of the question at the beginning was about sort of public-private nonprofit partnerships, and both of you have discussed areas where different pieces of the public sector are collaborating in a different way. So that's interesting to note as well. Phil.
Yes, well, New York City is a city of beautiful places, and we've been working now for quite some time on making another one in the South Bronx at the Hub. Some time ago, we put together a strategy to build a memorial to Roberto Clemente in the City Plaza program, Roberto Clemente Plaza, which is located 3rd Avenue and 149th Street. The plaza is now under construction. It's expected to be finished next year. It involves multiple city agencies. I had my staff write down. There's like 13 city agencies. There's 14 community organizations, and there's in the private sector, there's 14 organizations that are involved in the planning and organization for Roberto Clemente Plaza. But the plaza, the important thing for us about it, and one of the reasons why we're interested, first, we're creating a memorial to an icon who was here in the Bronx, and second, we're trying to create a place where something already exists. The Hub, as many of you may not know, is one of the busiest commercial districts in New York City. There are about 250,000 people walk through there every day. Many of them for transportation purposes. There's traffic, there's buses, there's subways. It's a merging place. It's like, downtown Brooklyn, where the trains come together and the buses come together and everybody gets through there sometime during the day if they live in the Bronx. So here's a place for economic opportunity, and we thought that we want to make a beautiful place there where people can stop and rest and eat and entertain and enjoy the art and culture from the neighborhood. And that's why we have all these different groups involved in figuring out what to do with the Roberto Clemente Plaza. We're building the memorial, as well as creating an outdoor space that can be used by the local businesses. And we have the Bronx Business Improvement District involved, as well as the business people who border the Roberto Clemente Plaza. So for us, we're an economic development organization. It's an economic development strategy. It's a cultural strategy. It's a recreation strategy. It fulfills all of those objectives, and it will be something that we hope will be beautiful and will work. Now, there are a lot of issues around doing this in the South Bronx, concerns. I mean, you could think about it. If you create a space for people to sit, I mean, are we going to have the right people sitting there? What's going to happen? And those types of things. So those issues we have to address as well. Our organization has a lead on it. We're responsible for maintaining and keeping that plaza operational and clean and safe. And I think that we're looking forward to having another beautiful place for people to come and visit in our neighborhood.
Great. Okay, we have time for one more lightning round question. And that's going to be, since collaborations are hard, cross-sector partnerships are hard, implementation is hard, and what's the one thing your agency or organization has had to do differently in order to, shave off the rough corners of the square peg going into the round hole? Who'd like to start? Tupper.
Well, we are actually really starting on being more of a grassroots organization. So we represent parks all the time on issues, and yet where is the base? And there's all these friends groups, all these people that Parks has great volunteers, but they're not all fighting together to improve parks. And so we're working on that.
You're becoming a base building organization.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that.
Go ahead.
I think also one of the things that I've seen in terms of the administration's engaging neighborhood residents around planning processes has been putting the people first. above and beyond the silo of my agency versus your agency versus her agency. If you put the residents first, I think that's really the most important thing, and that's what I'm seeing that most energizes me around this.
Public agencies responsible directly to people. That's
Look at that.
great innovation.
Yes, that's right. To think about the work that we're doing in communities and with stakeholders not as outreach, but as real engagement. And so, outreach is when you have a whole bunch of stuff, you think you have great ideas, you put a whole bunch of people in the room, and you hope you don't get screamed at. And there was a time, perhaps, when some of our work looked more like that as opposed to real engagement, where you deal with the real problems of real peoples and the real aspirations and the real change that they want to see in neighborhoods. And you do it often, you do it early, you don't do it just on a project-based level, and they stay engaged with that work. And instead of projects happening to them, that they actually become co-creators of that work. And so that's the shift that I know that we are making at EDC to build off of great engagement work that we've done for a number of years, but a real emphasis now in making sure that that really is part of the DNA of projects and how we run each and every one of them.
And Sobro, 40 years ago, was formed as a business organization, and it's been viewed that way in our constituency, where the business community, industrial, commercial enterprises in the South Bronx. So as we go into these projects, we're looking more like a community organization, because we have to involve the community residents, the residents in the neighborhood. We have to expand our outreach to a variety of stakeholders who are involved in doing these projects, and that's relatively new for us. I'm not saying new in the last year, it's new over the last 10 years, in that for the first 20, 25 years of our existence, really our primary constituency was the industrial and commercial business establishments in that neighborhood. So our organization is sort of transforming now into more of an organization that's trying to engage in a much broader way with the residents, with the community, and with all of the stakeholders who are interested in seeing what's going to happen, what's the future of the South Bronx now as we move forward into the next decade.
Well, a remarkable through line through this entire panel about engagement, responsiveness, listening. Thank you so much to our panel for a great conversation.
Perfect. Look at that.